Hey guys, I want to talk about how to deal with intrusive thoughts, images, sensation, urges, all surrounding taboo-based themes. I think this is a very important video because usually when you go on social media, the main tactics or recovery principles that people use when it comes to a taboo-based fear, incest, anything like that, the person is trying to just let them float, which is a big part of it, but there's no way that someone's going to get underneath those severe fears, such as like a harm OCD or a POCD or an HOCD, without some level of deeper, unconditional self-life, other acceptance. So what I've been doing lately is taking requests on my videos. So this is why I tell people to ask a bunch of questions. I have some sticky notes right here where I write the video titles down, and then sometimes I go through the comments. I haven't done a comment one in a while, but I think this question is really good. It's by a guy named Roger. He wrote a question on my video titled How to Stop Analyzing that came out about 5 days ago that did really, really well. Because a lot of people think that you could just automatically stop analyzing, and a lot of that is tied in there with rumination, and it's really automatic. So you're like, well, how do I stop it if it's automatic? And then I explain that in other acceptance videos. But in this specific video, I'm going to go through his entire comment, and I'm going to break down a lot of the things that I think he might be doing wrong. Maybe this is something you're going to be able to relate to, and let's just jump into it. But before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below, like I said. And if you want to contact us about coaching or webinar services, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com, and we'll get back to you in a timely fashion. Okay, so he starts off by saying, hey, Nick, I've been watching your videos since you were doing solo work about your different addictions, HOCD, SOCD, POCD, and taboo topics that are easy to brush off as this is different and not see it as a theme someone can obsessively fear. I was hoping you can cover some of those. So basically just a lot of people know that I've struggled with different types of addictions. One of them was adult website addiction. I always tell people pornography is not inherently good or bad. I had a very hard time balancing it, and it would always take over my life in very unhealthy ways. And then January 21st coming up here in 15 days, I'll be sober from adult websites for a year. And this is a big day for me. It's something I look forward to because it was very difficult for me to stop that. So that is something I will cover in a separate video. I get asked about that a lot, and I will cover that. So let's jump into it. Specifically, how to generalize the specific intrusive thoughts that bring fear and anxiety because they're taboo. Now, taboo-based fears will always bring high levels of panic and anxiety because it's accompanied by a realness, that feeling as real as it can get, and then the belief systems of I'm a monster, I'm a terrible person, if people only knew, all the compulsions. And that can range from not being around your own children. Literally, people will move out of the house and they'll live with the spouse or live with their parents, not watching a movie with children in them, not going near school zones, and numerous other compulsions and avoidance behaviors, trying to run from groinal responses, which need to be worn like every other sensation, etc., etc. I learned a lot about the fountain and the core issue. So the core issue is the core fear. So the fear of being a bad person, the fear of going to jail, the fear of your life being ruined. These are usually the core fears based in there. I have some trauma behind my issues that after learning through you and your other videos, I've learned to take those specific sensations and fear of thinking about the themes and generalize them as simple bad thoughts and bad feelings that your mind rings the alarm as a mental alarm dysfunction and not because it's necessary. So there's something a little bit wrong with that, Roger, but we'll cover that. But the first thing I want to go back to is I want to say I have some trauma behind my issues. Now, Roger, I'm going to speak to you directly, but anyone who has something like this. So for me, Roger, I've been through a lot in my life too. Like I had really, really severe OCD. I was in a mental hospital. When I was younger, I had viral encephalitis and meningitis and was in the hospital for a few months and almost died. I snapped my leg in half one time, was out for like 3, 4, 5 months, and a bunch of other stuff too. I was arrested multiple times as a kid because I just didn't want to follow the rules. But I realized that I don't look at, like Roger, I don't look at my specific suffering as traumatic. And the reason why I don't use the word trauma, and there's nothing like inherently wrong with using that word, but if we're not careful about using it, trauma almost always, not inherently, but the way that people use it in modern day society, it's almost always based off like, this is my trauma, you must respect me, this is what happened to me, this is unique, but it's not really unique, right, Roger? Like, everyone goes through really tough things. And again, this is not saying that you can't use that word. We don't use the word trauma because it's been so overplayed, like the word narcissist or gaslighting. These terms have no value anymore because they're so overused that someone will stub their toe and say they've been traumatized. Someone told them to shut up and they've been traumatized. And then if you talk to someone in the war and they got their legs blown off by a grenade and they were like, you know, it wasn't really traumatic, it was just a really tough experience, how can you correlate the two? So the word trauma can mean different things to different people. So my first suggestion in this is to walk away from that term and say something like a tough experience, or these are the things that happened to me. I know it seems minuscule, but it does kind of move us away and puts the ball back in our court. Because when we use the word trauma, it puts the ball in OCD or outside events courts, usually by the way people are using it. And I think when you start applying this, Roger, it's going to make a really, really big difference. So the other thing I want to say here, you said generalize them as simple bad thoughts and bad feelings. So you might have maybe misunderstood me. There might be a language barrier, but maybe not. So we don't want to, when you say, it's an alarm bell ringing in the brain, that's more of like a Claire Weeks approach, which is floating with it and allowing it to be there. But we know it doesn't work, which I'm going to read the remainder of your thing to everyone so they can see it. I never talk about the neurology and the neurophysiology and the alarm bells and what's happening. I think it's really cool. Like, obviously there's a decreased prefrontal cortex because there's something going on in the limbic system and the amygdala and all that type of stuff. But none of that actually really matters because we know there's a fear and then compulsions and avoidance behaviors related to that fear. And that's what's keeping the whole cycle alive. So I wouldn't necessarily look at it as alarm bells ringing in that sense. I would look at it as, what's my core fear? What are the compulsions and avoidance behaviors I'm engaging in? How can I systematically bring them down? And then where all the discomfort? Maybe you have chronic shame, chronic guilt, or anything like that. And I think this is so key, Roger, to look at because this is a big mistake I made. I tried to just leave a lot of my fears there. And any fear, this doesn't just have to be a taboo fear. But then I realized after a while I needed to really get under it with unconditional self-acceptance. And that made such a big difference for my overall progress. I think that was really good. Okay, I usually can't defeat the need to just let the type of thoughts and feeling just flow, even though I try really hard not to think about them and ring the alarm, but it's hard to let it go like any other rational thought. Okay, let's simplify that, okay? I try really hard not to think about it. That's the thing that stuck out to me. So you're not going to be able to just ignore it like that, right, Roger? Anyone who has anything in these type of fears, you're not going to be able to just allow that to flow in the sense of, I'm going to ignore you. I'm not going to pay attention to you. The problem is with the warrior statements, right? You hear, I'm an OCD warrior, I'm a warrior, I'm a battle survivor. The problem with that is it plays again into that kind of like, ooh, the ball's outside of my court. And you want to, it's not about taking control back. And it's about realizing, hey, look, these are the things I have to do to get myself better. And it's going to take a lot of time, but you're not going to be able to ignore it like that. You're going to have to allow all sensations, the willingness to experience anything, come and flow naturally, and that's a really big thing. So that's really key. Each theme plays the morality game and with each other. HOCD is okay because it's an adult sexuality, unlike where you have POCD and so on. So what you're doing here, what you just said there, is you put conditional acceptance on an unconditional thing. It's funny, Roger, because we all do this, right? Well, I can accept that and I can't accept that. But that would mean you're putting conditional acceptance on unconditional acceptance, where anything can be accepted when you start to realize that agreement doesn't mean acceptance. I don't like suffering with chronic anxiety. I don't like if I wasn't be able to hike or exercise. I wouldn't like if I gained a bunch of weight. I wouldn't like if I was stuck with sensory motor again. But it doesn't mean I can't learn to accept them because agreement doesn't mean acceptance. So once you realize that you can accept certain fears, Roger, and you can accept all fears, it's not particular or a single one, that's how you start to realize that unconditional acceptance is what it says on the tin. It's unconditional. Obviously, when an OCD sufferer sees this, they can tell their brain is correlating the wrong things together because at one point they traumatize themselves, wrongly correlating a sexual situation with any of the themes I talked about, such as HOCD, SOCD, POCD. Okay, so let's read the middle part of that again. They can tell their brain is correlating the wrong things together. So what you're saying there is, basically, I should be able to control these outcomes. And you can-ish, but not really. So if you're working on your beliefs now, you're giving yourself an opportunity to decrease your irrational beliefs in the future. But trying to pinpoint something like a line in the sand, you hear us talk about that a lot, Roger, but am I in the right relationship or not? Yes and no, right? Am I going to recover or not? Yes and no. How do I figure out if these things are wrongly correlated? Yes or no. So overall, it sounds like you have a good understanding of what's actually going on with these particular fears. And with these incest type fears, we get it a lot. A lot of people say, I've had existential, I've had relationship OCD, but this is the one, right? This is the one. But I hear that with everything. I hear people say sensory motor. I mean, Roger, do you have any idea how many people go like this when I start talking about sensory motor on webinars with their cameras off? Because I don't want to hear it. You have to be willing to hear every single fear anywhere, anytime, any place. So the best way to get over a harm OCD, a POCD, an incest OCD, a cheating OCD, because that's where morality and values, religious OCD, anything where that's kind of built in there, number one is acceptance doesn't mean agreement. This is not, it's easy on face value, simplistic in theory, very difficult to apply, but not impossible. Just takes a while. Reading, obviously, the third book on the reading list, The Myth of Self-Esteem, especially Chapter 4, Psychotherapy and the Value of the Human, which breaks down self-esteem. The whole book, The Myth of Self-Esteem, is a really good book because everyone moves with self-esteem as a primary way, building confidence, building self-worth, etc. But you're pouring water into a bucket that doesn't have a bottom, so it's constantly going in, and when it comes out the other side, it's just constantly needing to be refilled. Whereas have unconditional self-acceptance, that is, your emotions, you feel everything, but it's much more regulated. If you heard me talk about the pendulum swing, I really like that and talk about that a lot. Your emotions aren't swinging like all the way. Extreme anxiety, extreme depression, extreme shame, extreme guilt. You experience emotions because you're a human. This is something a lot of people get wrong about Stoicism, Roger, but particularly this is a very, very important thing. And I have not done one of these videos in a while, but I thought this comment was so good that it would make a lot of sense to do a video on it. So remember, reading the books on the reading list, leaning into that discomfort, so the shame, the guilt, the way it makes you feel, the depersonalization, the derealization, wearing those sensations as best as you can, that will be very, very necessary for you. And also looking at your compulsions and avoidance behaviors, Roger, because what happens is people will leave very subtle compulsions and very subtle avoidance behaviors thinking that oh, it's okay, I just have a couple of them there. But ask yourself this. If someone came to you, Roger, and they said, hey, I'm sober, I don't do any drugs, but I do a little bit of cocaine 3 times a month. You're like, well, you're not sober actually because you're still doing drugs. So unfortunately, what we're doing now, even in the addiction cycle, is we're changing the definitions of sobriety. I read a magazine finished about 5 days ago where they were talking about changing the definition of sobriety, which means you can drink on the weekends. It's very dangerous, and it can't be true. There's only one definition of sobriety, just like there's only one definition of OCD and anxiety recovery: the absence of chronic anxiety, shame, and guilt. Intrusive thoughts have lost their intrusiveness. You no longer have a large pendulum swing. You're rarely that angry. It's not that you'll never feel anger again, or you never will feel guilt. If Eric and I were in a car right now, and I looked down and look at a text message, and I hit a tree, and Erica died, there would be a pretty good chance I'd feel some guilt and shame. I just don't know if it would latch chronically because I have the tools now to work on that. And I'm not saying that my life would ever be the same again in many ways, but these are why these tools are so applicable to every other things in your life. So, basically the summary of this video is everyone with a taboo-based fear will definitely think they're different, but it's important to remind ourselves that OCD is OCD in the sense that we all think that we're different. Look at the compulsions and avoidance behaviors that you're doing. Lean into the discomfort. That's the groinal responses: shame, guilt, chronic anxiety, depersonalization. And break down the fears on paper. So if you haven't read the books on the reading list and set aside time to actually do some disputing, that's going to be a really good, important thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. Roger, specifically, I hope you enjoyed. I know everyone else watching, I was kind of talking to Roger in this because it was his comment. But plug yourself, and if your name is Sally, I'm saying Sally. If your name is Brian, your name is Brian. And go through too, and also go and watch Jade's videos, because Jade's done some tremendous videos in her journey with taboo-based fears. So has Sam Williams. They're both terrific inspirations in my life. They're both great. Hopefully I can meet them in person one day. I would love that. I think we'd have a lot of fun. So thank you so much for watching, everyone, especially you, Roger. Great comment. Again, I've been doing a lot of these, so comment on these videos. The more interaction, the better. And like I said, I get back to you, and if some of the comments are really good, and I see there are ones that people are asking a lot, I'll go through them. And again, if you're interested in our coaching and webinar services, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com, and we'll get back to you in a timely fashion. Have a good one, everyone, and Roger, enjoy the rest of your day.